What are President Obama's plans for taxing and spending over the long haul? In recession, are his policies appropriate? Republican U.S. Representative Paul Ryan joined Cato scholars on Capitol Hill to discuss the Obama budget and alternatives to it. This is a segment of a longer event available in full at cato.org.
He is not proposing to make us more competitive. He's not proposing to make it more attractive for businesses to stay in America, to create jobs and build things and export them. He's proposing to go in a completely different direction. Much higher taxes, much less competition. Here's the problem. When our competitors tax their employers a lot less than we tax ours, what do you think happens? We lose jobs. We lose competitiveness. This is the global economy now. Whether you like it or not, we are in the 21st century global economy. And it matters what the incentives are for the kinds of businesses we want to keep and attract to grow jobs in America. And so if you take a look at the Obama budget, it basically does one thing. It chases ever higher spending with ever higher taxes, and the two never actually catch up with one another, and therefore it creates an unprecedented amount of borrowing. If you wanted to be honest, the tax increases in the Obama budget would have to be more than double what they are already proposing. And so if you take a look at what fiscal situation we're in right now, it's a tough one. The president inherited a very dire fiscal situation. The nation is in a very dire fiscal crisis. So the question is, what do you do about it going forward? We think the wrong answer is to have a new gusher of spending, a new gusher of taxes, and a new gusher of borrowing. We think we ought to go in a different direction. We think we ought to contain and control and cut spending. We think we ought to get our deficits down, not up. We think we need to contain our borrowing, and we think we need to reform government. We need to reform the way we spend. We need to reform our entitlement programs, and we need to reform our tax system so that we can lead in the global economy, not be following in the global economy. I really honestly believe that the next 4 or 5 years are really going to define what America is to become in the 21st century. This budget is the largest sea-changing budget we have seen. And what people tease me around here, I've been reading federal budgets since I was 22 years old, which is kind of a sick thing to acknowledge. But I've never seen anything ever like this. This budget really does propose a completely different kind of a pathway for America. This budget does propose to bring us toward a European style and form of government. Now, in one way that's unfair. It's unfair to Europe because the kinds of taxing, the kinds of borrowing that are being proposed in this budget even surpasses their levels. You'll see at the G20, the Europeans are saying, oh, slow down, don't do all of this borrowing, we're not going to do this. Problem we're having is that who is going to buy all of our bonds at the end of the day? And especially if the credit markets don't see that we're ever going to get this under control, we're going to have some serious problems. We're going to have currency problems. We're going to have problems with respect to our borrowing costs. And at the end of the day, the question is this. Are we going to maintain or sever the American legacy? And what is the American legacy? Every generation takes on the challenges that confront it within that generation, fixes those challenges so the next generation is better off. I really sincerely believe that if this budget actually comes to pass, if the policies produced in this budget occur, we will sever that American legacy. We will be consigning the next generation to an inferior standard of living. Just looking at what this budget proposes, just looking at the reforms that it lacks and the spending that it proposes, my 3 children who are 4, 5, and 7 years old will for sure receive an inferior standard of living. The size of our government will grow such that when they are my age, they will have to pay at least double the amount of taxes we pay today just to keep this current government afloat. Instead of reforming entitlements, the president's proposing to create brand new ones. Instead of controlling spending, the president is proposing to have a gusher of new spending. Instead of controlling taxes, reforming our tax system, he's proposing to dramatically raise them. And at the end of the day, this tidal wave of red ink is something that just cannot be sustained. And so we say this is not inevitable. These kinds of deficits, debt, taxes, and borrowing is not necessary. The problem we have right now is the other side is basically saying we are the only solution. They're going to use the intimidation tactics of fear and envy. Class warfare is alive in America today, but it is not an American thing. Pitting people against each other is not what America is all about. If you take a look at the root philosophical underpinnings of this rhetorical onslaught behind this unprecedented growth of government, it is basically this: the American people should be comfortable because they're going to be stuck in their current station in life, and we need to grow government to help them cope with it. That's not what America's about. That's not who we are. That's not what we want to have. We want people to advance their station in life. We want people to be able to reach their potential, reach their prosperity, and move up through the ranks. And in order to do that, you have to have a government that's limited. You have to have freedom and liberty as your guiding principles. You have to reapply those enduring first principles of this country to the problems of the day in order to solve those problems so that this century is yet again another great American century. I am going to say one thing that I'm told is very controversial, at least here in Washington. I think America is an exceptional nation. People tell me that's controversial. I don't think it is. And so why on earth would we want to dig ourselves into the kind of hole that Europe right now is trying to dig itself out of? Our friends in Europe are already telling us, don't do this, learn from our mistakes. If we know that this pathway doesn't work, if we know that it creates economic stagnation, lower standards of living, higher unemployment, why on earth would we want to do that? And that is why you're going to see a robust opposition to the president's budget. That is why tomorrow you'll see us release our budget, which proposes to go in a completely different direction so that we actually can revive the prosperity that we've had and enjoyed in this country and can take care of these fiscal problems under our watch, not pass them on to the next generation.
Republican U.S. Representative Paul Ryan spoke on Capitol Hill at the Cato event, Obama's Blueprint for Growing the Welfare State, held March 31, 2009. You can watch the full event at cato.org.